They say travel broadens the mind. But what if it opens doors you wish were sealed shut? The promise of escape, the allure of the unknown. Travel can be intoxicating, but sometimes that allure masks a darkness that lurks just beneath the surface. Tonight, we delve into 3 stories where the dream vacation became a descent into terror. 3 tales of trips that went wrong, and the chilling consequences that followed. A breathtaking coastal hike. A casual conversation with a friendly stranger. But what if that stranger was never really there? Jason and his brother set out on what should have been an unforgettable trip along Portugal's stunning cliffs. And unforgettable it was, but for all the wrong reasons. Because by the time they reached the top, Jason realized something chilling. No one else remembers the man walking beside them. And yet, he's right there, in the photos. Stay with us as we unravel a story that will leave you questioning your own memories and the people around you. I had always wanted to visit Portugal, especially its famous coastal cliffs. There was something about those golden cliffs plunging into the Atlantic that fascinated me. So when my brother, Matt, suggested a hiking trip along the Algarve coast, I jumped at the opportunity. We landed in Lisbon, rented a car, and drove south to a small town near Lagos. The plan was simple: wake up early, hike a scenic trail along the cliffs, and be back before the afternoon heat became unbearable. The path was well known but not overly crowded, perfect for a quiet, refreshing hike. The morning of the hike, the sky was clear, and the air was crisp with the salty scent of the ocean. We set off just after sunrise, the trail winding along the edge of the cliffs, offering breathtaking views of the waves crashing against the rocks far below. As we walked, we took turns talking about life, work, and the usual things brothers catch up on when they haven't seen each other in a while. That's when a man joined us. He appeared so casually that I didn't even think twice about it. One moment, it was just Matt and me. The next, he was there, walking alongside us as if he had always been part of the group. He looked to be in his mid-40s, tan skin, dark hair, a bit of stubble. Dressed like any other hiker, cargo shorts, a light jacket, sturdy boots. He carried a small backpack, just like us. "Beautiful morning, isn't it?" he said, smiling. I nodded, returning the smile. "Yeah, perfect weather for a hike." He fell in a step beside us, his pace steady, his demeanor relaxed. He introduced himself as Lucas, said he was from Lisbon but had been traveling down the coast, exploring different trails. Matt, always the more social one, struck up a conversation with him. They talked about Portugal's history, the best seafood spots, and other local hikes worth checking out. I listened, occasionally adding a comment here and there, but mostly focused on the trail ahead. Something about him was ordinary, completely forgettable, even. Yet at the same time, I couldn't shake a strange feeling in my gut, like he didn't belong. Not in a supernatural way, just something didn't add up. We walked together for a while, enjoying the views. At some point, Matt mentioned stopping for water. We found a flat spot near the cliff's edge, where the ocean stretched endlessly before us. As we took out our bottles, I noticed something odd. Lucas wasn't carrying any water. It was a small detail, nothing too strange. Maybe he had already finished his bottle. Maybe he was used to hiking without much hydration. But we had been walking for over an hour under the rising sun, and he didn't seem the least bit thirsty. "You want some?" I asked, offering him my bottle. He shook his head, smiling. "Thanks, but I'm good." His voice was pleasant, his expression friendly. There was no reason to be suspicious, and yet that nagging feeling in my gut tightened. After resting for a few minutes, we continued. The trail curved along a steep incline, leading up to an overlook where the view was supposed to be incredible. As we climbed, the conversation drifted. Lucas spoke about history again, but his knowledge was unusual. "It's strange to think how many people have stood on these cliffs over the centuries," he said, looking out at the sea. "Sailors, explorers, even soldiers. Some left, some never did. The way he said it sent a small shiver down my spine. It wasn't what he said, it was how he said it. Like he wasn't just talking about history, like he'd seen it. When we reached the top of the overlook, we all stopped to catch our breath. The view was breathtaking, blue waves stretching to the horizon, sunlight glinting off the water, the cliffs rugged and ancient. I turned to say something to Lucas. He was gone. At first, I assumed he had just walked ahead or stepped off the trail. But as I scanned the area, I saw no sign of him. No movement. No sound of footsteps. Where'd he go? I asked Matt. He gave me a confused look. Who? I frowned. Lucas, the guy we were just talking to. Matt's face twisted into something between amusement and concern. Dude, what are you talking about? It's just us. I let out a nervous laugh. Come on, we were literally just talking to him. Matt shook his head. We've been hiking alone this whole time. I stared at him, my mouth dry. He wasn't joking. There was no trace of humor in his eyes. I tried to brush it off. Maybe Matt was messing with me. Maybe I was just tired and my mind was playing tricks. But the rest of the hike fell off. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see Lucas reappear. He never did. When we finally made it back to town, I checked my phone. I had taken a few pictures along the way, mostly of the scenery. But one picture stopped me cold. It was a shot of Matt standing by the cliffs. A normal photo, except we weren't alone. Behind him, just slightly out of focus, was Lucas, smiling. I didn't say anything to Matt first. Maybe it was a trick of the light. Maybe it was another hiker who just happened to be in the background. But the more I looked at the picture, the more certain I became. It was him. The same clothes. The same face. Later that night, after dinner, I showed Matt the picture. He stared at it, his face pale. That's impossible. You remember him now? I asked, my voice tight. Matt shook his head slowly. No, I remember the hike, but I don't remember him being there. We sat in silence for a long time. I don't know what happened that day. I don't know if it was exhaustion, heat, or something else, but there was one thing I did know. I wasn't alone on that trail. And somewhere, somehow, someone else had been watching. The picture remains saved on my phone. I've shown it to friends, to family. Some say it's just another hiker who happened to be in the shot. Others say I must have met someone and my brother simply forgot. But deep down, I know that's not the case. Because the more I stare at that picture, the more I notice something chilling. In every photo, Lucas is always slightly behind us. Always watching. And I never remember seeing him leave. Anna had been dreaming of a solo vacation along Italy's breathtaking Amalfi coast. A peaceful escape, just her, the open road, and the sea. But from the moment she picked up her rental car, something felt off. Strangers kept glancing at her passenger seat. A waiter asked when her friend would arrive. And then, she saw the photo. What started as a dream trip soon turned into an unsettling mystery she couldn't explain. By the time she learned the truth, it was too late to turn back. Would you have noticed the warning signs? Let's dive into this chilling real-life story. I had been dreaming of this trip for years. The Amalfi Coast, cliffside villages, turquoise waters, winding roads hugging the mountains. After months of working overtime, I finally took the plunge. 1 week alone, driving through Italy, soaking in the sights, the food, and the solitude. I landed in Naples, picked up my rental car, an older silver sedan with just enough where to show it had seen a lot of roads, and set off. The first few hours were blissful. The road curled along the cliffs, revealing breathtaking views at every turn. I rolled down my window, letting the warm, coastal breeze tangle my hair. The air smelled of salt and lemon groves. By the time I reached a small gas station near Sorrento, the sun was setting, casting long golden shadows over the hills. I decided to fill up and grab a quick snack before continuing to my hotel. That's when I noticed her. An older woman, short and thin, her gray hair pulled into a tight bun. She stood near the entrance of the station's convenience store, arms crossed over her chest. She wasn't doing anything, just watching me. When I stepped out of the car, she took a small step forward. Her gaze flicked to the passenger seat, then back to me. "You shouldn't be driving alone." Her voice was quiet but firm. I hesitated, unsure if she was speaking to me or someone inside the store. "Sorry," I asked, forcing a polite smile. She shook her head. "Be careful." A shiver ran down my spine, though I had no reason to feel uneasy. She was just an old woman, maybe superstitious. I thanked her awkwardly, filled my tank, and left. The road stretched ahead, curving dangerously close to steep drop-offs. The headlights of my car barely cut through the darkness. It was past 9 p.m. when I reached the small coastal town where I had booked my stay. The hotel was a family-run bed and breakfast, charming and rustic. The owner, a man in his 60s named Marcelo, greeted me warmly and checked me in. As I signed to register, he glanced at the parking lot and then back at me. "You drove here?" he asked. I nodded. "Alone?" His eyes flicked toward the car again, just for a second. I laughed. "Yes, just me." He hesitated, but said nothing more. The room was lovely, small, with an antique dresser and a window overlooking the sea. I took a long shower, washed off the travel fatigue, and climbed into bed. That night, I barely slept, not because of noise, there was none, but because my mind kept replaying the woman's words. "You shouldn't be driving alone." The next day was perfect. I spent the morning wandering the streets of Positano, shopping for handmade ceramics, and sipping espresso at a small cafe. I even started laughing at myself for getting spooked the night before. But then it happened again. At lunch, I stopped at a small restaurant overlooking the sea. The waiter, a young man, maybe in his early 20s, approached my table with a menu. He smiled at me, then glanced at the empty chair across from me. "Will your friend be joining you soon?" My stomach tightened. "I'm alone." His smile faltered, but he nodded. "Of course. Let me know when you're ready to order." I tried to brush it off, but the rest of the meal felt strange. Every so often, I caught the waiter glancing at my table, as if expecting someone else to arrive. By the time I left, my nerves were shot. That evening, I decided to drive to a scenic overlook to watch the sunset. It was about 15 minutes outside town, along a deserted stretch of road. As I parked, I pulled out my phone to snap a quick selfie. I framed the shot, the golden light casting a glow over the cliffs behind me. Later that night, as I scrolled through my photos in bed, my breath caught in my throat. In the picture, I was smiling, the cliffs behind me bathed in light. But there was something else. The passenger seat wasn't empty. It was subtle, almost like a trick of the light, but there was a faint outline, an indistinct shape slightly blurred. I stared at it for a long time, trying to make sense of it. The rational part of me knew it had to be a reflection, maybe the way the sunset played against the car's interior. But I barely slept that night. The next morning, I decided to return the car early. Maybe I was overthinking things, but I no longer felt comfortable driving it. When I arrived at the rental agency, the clerk, an older man with thick-rimmed glasses, took the keys and started filling out paperwork. He glanced out the window. "You had the silver sedan?" "Yeah," I said. He nodded slowly, then looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You were alone the whole time?" The question made my skin crawl. "Yes. Why?" He hesitated, then shook his head. "No reason." But I could see it in his face. He knew something. That night, I searched online out of curiosity, typing in keywords, Amalfi Coast car accident, missing tourist, silver sedan. And then I found it. A news article from 1 year ago. A woman, around my age, had rented a silver sedan while vacationing in the area. She had gone missing while driving alone on the same coastal roads. The last known sighting of her. A gas station near Sorrento. The article never said what happened to her, just that she was never seen again. I closed my laptop, my pulse hammering. I didn't sleep that night, and I never drove alone in a rental car again. What was supposed to be a simple road trip to Mexico turned into something far more unsettling. Lucas and his friends had everything planned. An easy drive, a weekend of fun. But when their GPS led them onto an isolated desert road, things started to feel wrong. No signs, no service, just miles of nothingness. And then, they found a gas station. The old attendant gave them one warning: turn around now. By the time they realized why, it was already too late. Would you have listened to the warning? Let's dive into this chilling real-life story. There's something about road trips that makes you feel untouchable. The open road, the music blasting, the laughter of your friends. It all makes the world seem smaller, like nothing bad can happen as long as you keep driving. That's what I thought when we set off for Mexico. There were 4 of us, me, my best friend Danny, his girlfriend Sarah, and her cousin Mark. We were all in our mid-20s, eager to escape work and responsibilities for a few days of sun, cheap beer, and tacos by the beach. The plan was simple: drive from San Diego to Ensenada, then follow the coastal highway to a secluded Airbnb we had rented for the weekend. A smooth, easy trip. At least, that's what we thought. The sun was already setting by the time we crossed the border. I was driving, with Sarah navigating from the passenger seat. The GPS directed us onto a narrow highway that cut through the desert, promising a faster route to the house. That was our first mistake. At first, the road seemed fine. A little empty, sure, but the desert stretched endlessly in all directions, so it wasn't surprising. It wasn't until about an hour in that we realized something was wrong. Danny, who had been scrolling on his phone in the back seat, spoke up. "Hey, is it just me? Or do we not have service anymore?" Sarah checked her phone. "Mine's out too." Mark leaned forward. "Lucas, how much longer does the GPS say?" I glanced at the screen. It had frozen. The little arrow indicating our car was stuck in place, no longer moving. The estimated arrival time read midnight. A glitch. "Great," I muttered. "Sarah, try reloading it." She tapped the screen a few times. "It's not working." The road stretched on, straight and endless, with no signs, no gas stations, nothing but sand and distant mountains. I checked the fuel gauge. Half a tank left, enough to turn back if we needed to. "We must have missed a turn," I said. "We'll keep going for a bit, see if it corrects." But it didn't. And 20 minutes later, the pavement ended. At first, I thought it was just a rough patch of road, but as I slowed down, the asphalt gave way to packed dirt. Loose sand kicked up behind us as the tires struggled for grip. "This isn't right," Sarah said, her voice tense. "We should turn around," Mark added. I pressed the brakes. "I don't know, guys. We've been driving for almost 2 hours. We might be close." Danny leaned forward. "Yeah, but close to what? There's nothing out here." I hesitated. He was right. The desert was vast and empty, and the farther we drove, the more isolated we became. But something in me, a stubbornness, maybe, didn't want to admit we had wasted hours driving in the wrong direction. "We'll go a little farther," I said. "If we don't see anything soon, we turn back." Nobody argued. Maybe they felt it too. The silent pressure of the unknown, the feeling that stopping was somehow worse than moving forward. The road narrowed, becoming uneven. I had to slow to a crawl to avoid potholes. Just as I was about to admit defeat, we spotted something ahead. A small gas station. The station was old, its single pump rusted and covered in chipped red paint. A fluorescent light flickered above the convenience store, casting a sickly glow on the pavement. I exhaled, relieved. Finally. I pulled up to the pump and killed the engine. The silence that followed felt heavy. Through the glass door of the store, I saw a man sitting behind the counter, staring straight ahead. He didn't move as we approached. Inside, the store was dimly lit, shelves mostly empty except for a few dusty snack packs and faded soda bottles. The air smelled of old oil and stale air conditioning. Danny and Mark lingered by the entrance while Sarah and I walked up to the counter. The attendant was an older man, mid-50s maybe, with sun-weathered skin and deep lines on his face. He looked up slowly as we approached. "Hey," I said. We're kind of lost. We were heading to Ensenada, but I think our GPS messed up." The man didn't respond right away. His dark eyes flicked from me to Sarah, then past us, to the door where Danny and Mark stood. "You're on the wrong road," he finally said. His voice was raspy dry. I forced a chuckle. "Yeah, we figured. Can you tell us how to get back to the highway?" He didn't answer. Instead, he leaned forward slightly. "You need to turn around now." Sarah tensed beside me. We were thinking of going a little further to see if there's another way. The man's expression didn't change. "No, turn around now." A chill crawled up my spine. I glanced back at Danny and Mark. They had noticed the strange vibe too, shifting uncomfortably near the door. Something about the way the man spoke, so certain, so final, unnerved me. Still, I forced a smile. "All right, thanks for the help." We left quickly. As I reached the car, I glanced back at the station. The man was still watching us through the glass, unmoving. We didn't stop again until we were miles away. Driving back felt different. The dirt road was gone. The rough, sandy path we had taken to the station was now smooth asphalt. I checked the rearview mirror. Nothing but empty highway stretching behind us. No sand, no potholes, no sign that we had ever been off-road at all. Nobody spoke. The silence in the car was thick, tense. It wasn't until we reached the lights of Ensenada that Sarah finally exhaled. "That was weird, right?" Danny let out a dry laugh. "Yeah, really weird." Mark, who had been quiet the entire drive back, finally spoke. "Let's not take shortcuts anymore." Nobody argued. That night, in our Airbnb, I searched for the gas station on Google Maps. It wasn't there. I zoomed in, scanning every road in the area. Nothing. Frustrated, I checked online forums for travelers who had taken the same route. One post caught my eye, dated 5 years ago. "Anyone ever take the back road through the desert? We found an old gas station out there, but when we checked the map later, it didn't exist. Locals said it burned down years ago after a car broke down nearby. Nobody survived." I stared at the screen, my hands cold. The station had been empty. The road had changed. And worst of all, the man at the counter had spoken as if he knew we were coming.